You may have seen the 2015 video already of a team of marine biologists struggling to remove a plastic straw that had been lodged inside of a sea turtle's nose. Has anyone seen this video? I briefly, for like 2 seconds, considered playing this video for you all today. But honestly, it is just too upsetting. Right? Like, Sarah McLaughlin watches this video and says, I can't even. This is just too sad. The turtle is fine, by the way. They got the straw out of its nose. It's fine. It's a great big beautiful sea turtle out at sea somewhere right now. But as we know, and as I'm sure you've seen in other images and as we read in news stories, many animals are not so lucky. And they are permanently harmed either from being trapped or entangled in plastic or from ingesting plastic. We have a problem with plastic in our oceans. The UN Environment Program reports that 8 million tons of plastic per year ends up in our oceans. The Greenpeace Oceans Campaign, quoted in the Seattle Times, characterizes this as the equivalent of one garbage truck full of plastic entering the world's oceans every minute. Now, 8 million tons sounds like a lot, at least it sounds like a lot to me, but on the other hand, the ocean is really big, like really big. So how much is that really? Well, according to the UN Environment Council, at the rate that we are going, plastic is going to outweigh all of the fish in the ocean by 2050. There will be more plastic in the ocean than sea creatures. So that sounds like a lot to me. Why do we have so much of this stuff to begin with? Well, the great thing about plastic, which is simultaneously one of its problems, is that as a material, it is incredibly useful, incredibly cheap, and incredibly durable. Plastic takes between 500 and 1,000 years to break down in the environment. Once you've made a plastic, whatever it is that you have made, it is not going anywhere for a long time. Which is great, but because it is so cheap and so versatile, so much of what we make with plastic is actually intended to be used once and thrown away. We make it out of this material that's going to be here for 1,000 years, but we only intend to use it once. So there's this tremendous mismatch between its properties. According to the website earthday.org, half of all plastic production is for single-use items. 40% is just for packaging, the stuff that we put the stuff in that we take off and throw away. And about 1/3 of the plastics that are going into the ocean, 1/3 of the ocean plastic, is coming from items that were intended to be used only once. And that's from the group Zero Waste Washington, again quoted in the Seattle Times. So what does this single-use plastic look like? Well, there's all that packaging, of course. According to Forbes, we now buy globally 1 million plastic water bottles a minute. So in 2020, we are going to buy 500 billion plastic bottles of water. 500 billion. And since 90% of all plastics are not recycled, all of those water bottles are going somewhere, into the landfills or into the oceans. We use 4 trillion plastic bags annually, only 1% of which are recycled. And we use a lot of plastic straws. You've heard about straws, we use a lot of plastic straws. How many plastic straws do we use? No one seems to know. In 2011, a 9-year-old boy, realizing that there was not an answer to this question, started calling straw manufacturers, and he came up with an estimate of 500 million plastic drinking straws used and thrown away every day just in the US. And you will see that number quoted all over the place, from the New York Times to the Wall Street Journal to the LA Times. Whatever the true number is, we can confidently say a lot. A lot of straws are being used. And a lot of those straws, along with other single-use plastics, are going to end up in the ocean where the fish live. And the whales, and the dolphins, and the seabirds, and the turtles, and oh so many different kinds of living beings. And the results of all of this cluttering up of their natural environment are not happy. 2015, 90% of seabirds studied had eaten plastic. 90%. We've all read stories, I'm sure, of beached whales with great quantities of plastic in their digestive system. But in fact, plastic is permeating every layer of the ocean ecosystem. And the reason for this, again, comes back to that amazing durability of plastic. It doesn't degrade. It doesn't break down. So in a harsh ocean environment, plastic doesn't break down, it just breaks apart. It disintegrates into finer and finer, indigestible, hard bits of plastic. Those are these so-called microplastics you may have heard about. And these minuscule bits of plastic are eaten by plankton, which are eaten by the little fish, which are eaten by bigger fish, and on up the food chain until plastic is a pervasive contaminant inside all marine organisms. And since we also partake in that food chain, microplastics are also becoming pervasive inside of people. But it is not just microplastics in the seafood we consume. They are also found in the bottled water that we drink. World Health Organization did a study in 2018, found microplastics in 90% of bottled water. Our synthetic clothing shed microplastics. It's been found in the soil, in tap water, in beer, I'm sorry to say, even floating on the breeze. So increasingly, plastics are taking up residence in all of our bodies. And I say that, and I want to follow that up immediately with a very important statement. There is at present no scientific evidence that ingesting microplastics is causing harm. So I want to be sure you hear that. At present, no scientific evidence that this is causing us harm. However, there's also just not a lot of science on this at all. It hasn't been studied very well, so there are very large gaps in our knowledge about what this plastic contamination might have as far as risks. So there's a lot more research that is needed here. So all of this, the plastics choking the oceans, the contribution of single-use plastics, the viral video of the sea turtle, brings us back to the subject of plastic straws, from which we get the title for this sermon. In 2008, Seattle became the first major U.S. city to ban single-use plastic. In 2018, a citywide ban on straws and cutlery went into effect in all Seattle restaurants and bars. Seattle-based Starbucks announced that it was moving to eliminate all plastic straws from its 28,000 coffee shops nationwide, replacing them with recyclable, sippable lids. Starbucks says this will eliminate more than 1 billion plastic straws a year. More than 1 billion. Other companies are jumping on the bandwagon: McDonald's, American Airlines, Marriott and Hyatt hotels. Other cities are looking at following suit. New York is thinking about it. So this ban on plastic straws seems to have, for the moment, captured the imagination of businesses and municipalities that want to do something about this proliferation of single-use plastic. And this is surely something to celebrate. There was, however, one community that was not particularly celebrating this accelerating ban of plastic straws. And that was the community for which plastic straws were originally mass-produced. 1937, a man named Joseph Friedman invented the flexible straw, the bendy straw, after watching his daughter Judith struggle to reach to the top of a very tall milkshake. But when the first bendy straws were mass-produced, they were purchased not by diminutive soda drinkers, but by hospitals. Because plastic straws, it turns out, were a life-saving innovation to people dealing with disabilities. And advocates within the disability community have expressed serious concerns about the impact of a plastic straw ban on people who actually need plastic straws. But when they raised these concerns among the advocates for the plastic straw bans, especially online, these conversations did not go well at all. At all. We need plastic straws, the people with disabilities, their advocates said. And the response was, you need plastic straws? Does anyone really need a plastic straw? Yes, was the response. Some people actually cannot lift a cup to their mouth. They need a straw. Well, okay, just use a paper biodegradable straw then, said the advocates. Well, paper straws fall apart. This is a potentially deadly choking hazard, was the response. Well, fine, just use a reusable metal straw then. Well, it turns out metal straws are dangerous for people who may lack fine motor control. You can actually stab yourself with a metal straw. You can injure yourself with one. Well, fine, they said, just use a reusable rubber straw then. Well, it turns out that some people with disabilities cannot properly clean a rubber straw, which causes lots of problems. And any kind of reusable straw means that a person with a disability has to remember to pack a straw with them wherever they go, which is not a very appealing lifestyle option. Well, okay, said the straw ban advocates, what did you do before there were plastic straws? And the answer, says Sean Bickley, is we aspirated liquid into our lungs, developed pneumonia, and died. Because that is what happened before people with disabilities had access to plastic straws. For some people with disabilities, the plastic straw is not only liberating, allowing for a measure of freedom in just like going about your day that us temporarily able-bodied people take for granted, it is also a life-saving innovation, But although Sean Binkley serves on a commission that is supposed to advise Seattle City Agency on Disabilities issues, NPR reports, no one consulted the group before passing the plastic straw ban. No one talked to the impacted community. Now, there is a simple and obvious solution here, which is for businesses to simply keep some plastic straws on hand for the people that actually need them. But will they do it? The Seattle law has exemptions for people with disabilities, the ban, but advocates have found that most businesses are not aware of these exemptions, and so they're not necessarily going to keep straws on hand. Starbucks said they will make straws available after people with disabilities threatened to protest them, but they didn't say they would make plastic straws available, they just said straws. And I bring this up because this whole mess of a conversation is an example of something that we know, but we often need to be reminded of anyway. Environmental issues are very, very, very complex. And let me add a little more complexity to this issue since we're talking about plastics. Plastics are in many cases actually very good for the environment. Globally, about 1/3 of food grown for human consumption is spoiled, is wasted. 1/3. And growing food is an incredibly resource-intensive process, which is hard on the earth and generates greenhouse gases, deforestation, and all of these other environmental concerns. So plastics are actually a significant means by which we reduce global food spoilage. This is not only good for the environment, but you can imagine how important it is to many communities that need to eat food to live. 90% of the plastics that are entering the ocean, 90% of the plastics that are going into the ocean are coming from a handful of rivers in Asia and North Africa. Because this plastic waste, the vast majority of it, is coming from a few countries that have experienced tremendously rapid economic growth in the past few decades. Such fast growth that they basically grew beyond the ability of their existing waste management infrastructure to handle it. Well, that economic growth was a very good thing for the people who experienced it. And this means two things. This fact, 90% comes from these handful of countries. One, it means that any reduction of single-use plastics that we do, although it is very important, will not have a significant, large impact on ocean plastic. And the second thing is that it implies the biggest impact we could have as a rich Western country if we really wanted to tackle this issue is not in reducing our individual straw use, although that would be a wonderful thing, but investing in the infrastructure in these countries to allow them to better manage their waste, and encourage other rich countries to invest in global infrastructure that deals with these problems. And as you can imagine, this is not a sexy issue for politicians to run on. right? Not a lot of politicians are saying, well, if you elect me, I'm going to take your tax money and invest it in global waste management systems. Right? It's right here on my slogan. And in the long term, this implies that we have to reconcile global economic growth with environmental health, because other countries are going to want economic growth, and we can't continue to enjoy our increasingly wasteful, disposable, plastic-wrapped Western consumer culture while insisting that the rest of the world do without. So we have to decide, what does an environmentally responsible world even look like if it is also equitable economically? So, this is complex. And individual action is still really important. Good old reduce, reuse, recycle. Or if it's single-use plastics, refuse, reuse, recycle, right? We need that. But in the long run, what is really needed is collective action, organizing, education, advocacy, and what I will call spiritual action, which is changing people's vision, values, and priorities, reimagining the future together. In fact, some scientists have expressed concern that things like straw bans could actually prove harmful in the long run if they satisfy people's need to do something while drawing attention away from the long-term systemic changes that are actually needed. So organizing for collective action, changing people's vision and values, imagining a different future together, these are all things that happen in relationships over time. They require relationship. They require complex, sensitive, nuanced conversations in which we bring everyone to the table and listen sensitively to people's lived experiences and their needs and their concerns. The conversation between environmental activists and disability activists went so very wrong because the environmentalists forgot to talk to the disabilities community to begin with. And that wasn't because they didn't care, it was a failure of imagination, right? They looked at something that seemed trivial and disposable to themselves, and they just couldn't imagine that it could be of life-saving importance to someone else. It wasn't a failure of heart, it was a failure of imagination. But once the ban was underway and the conversation started, they did fail to listen with sensitivity. They did not believe what people with disabilities were telling them about their own experiences. So disability activists had to force the issue and threaten protests and say again and again and again that they needed access to these things. And they still face uncertainty on this issue. And I bring this up because this is no way to build relationships, the kind of relationships that we're going to need if we're going to imagine a better world together. I like to think of Unitarian Universalist churches as places where we practice both things simultaneously, being in better relationship with one another and imagining a better world together. Our sixth and our first and our seventh principle call us to build a peaceful and just world that respects the inherent worth and dignity of each person and respects the interdependent web of life, right? We are called by our religious values to build a world that is environmentally sustainable, that also meets the diverse needs of individuals and communities. That is no small order, right? We're not going to get there without a lot of dreaming. We're not going to get there without a lot of dreaming, and we're not going to get there by dreaming alone. By dreaming alone. So fortunately, our other principles give us a lot of insight into how we can dream together. And it involves listening with kindness and compassion. It involves respecting other people's truths, their lived experiences, even if those do not jibe with our own. It means giving everyone a voice and living into a place of solidarity where your needs become as important as mine. And it means being willing to have hard conversations, to stay in relationship through real, substantive, sometimes painful disagreements, rather than walking or rolling away from the table. As people of faith, as people of religious vision, as Unitarian Universalists, we have the opportunity to approach the environmental problem from many levels. We have our individual opportunities to make sustainable choices, refuse, reuse, recycle. We have the work we do with our organizations, our collective action, education, advocating, and we are building and supporting this house of dreams. And every day we invite new dreamers to join us, and all levels of this work are important. So now I want to invite just one of our dreamers here up to say a few words about what this work means to her, and that is Helene Hodek from our sustainability team. Helene?
Good morning, everyone. I didn't know when I took my walk this morning that I would find something that people as ignorant as the king in the story left behind. And here it is, a single-use stack of chips that says gluten-free and please recycle. And next to this, I found this, a half or two-thirds full bottle of water that someone had pitched. And this was in Murat Park, which is a very fortunate place that we get to walk through every morning. So I got to thinking, and then of course there's this, which I reused to carry the other objects in. So sustainability is working on a variety of things, including recycling. And Jeanette and I will be at it. Jeanette, can you stand up and wave? There she is, right in the back of the church, and we have a table where we're going to give you, if this is all going to be put out in the e-blast next Thursday, but I have a few hard copies for people who want them, and it talks about how to recycle using our Republic recycling bins, Republic Services recycling bins, and our paper retriever, which is over there. And also, future events include an October Meridian Cussler Alley cleanup headed by Tom Bell. This will be the third one he's organized this year. He is a member of UUI and Butler-Tarkington, I said Meridian Cussler, Butler-Tarkington Neighborhood Association. And another one is a project, I don't have final dates for these, but they'll be coming, of turning old t-shirts into bags to reuse for every age. And we're going to have a post-holiday number 6 styrofoam recycling for people who get electronics, and it also takes the rigid foam which cracks around pharmaceuticals and medications and other things. We're going to have a big drive for that. Now, in the meantime, when you take a walk, please remember to pick up and recycle whatever you find. And what inspires me to continue doing this is from a Navajo proverb. I have been to the end of the earth. I have been to the end of the waters. I have been to the end of the sky. I have been to the end of the mountains. I have found none that are not my friends. Thank you.
Thank you to Helene, and thank you to Jeanette and Tom and all of the people who are doing hard work to bring sustainable practices to UUI. Look for all of the projects that they're going to be announcing over the next several months. And then also the 8th Principal Task Force is going to be introducing some ideas about environmental justice to the congregation, which is environmental work focused on having those hard conversations we've been talking about between communities with very different experiences. It's an important part of how we live into our green vision. So if you will, please take a breath with me. Let it out. And take one more. And let it out. Let us open our hearts again with gratitude for the earth and all her gifts. We ask for kindness and well-being for all creatures. We ask for wisdom in how we live so that we may be good neighbors to creation. In this house of dreams and dreamers, may we listen to one another's hopes for a better world, and may we respond with courage, compassion, and commitment. May we take the utmost care and kindness in all things. Breathe in, the poet says, knowing we are made of all this, and breathe, knowing we are truly blessed. In all the work that we do together in our collective dreaming, we pray that it will be done in beauty, in beauty.